Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Creative Podcast. My name is Sean.
And my name is Fitz. We are your hosts.
Yeah.
Sean, what we're talking about today.
Oh, yeah. So, every episode we're talking about creative things that affect us, creative things on a global level, creative things all over the place, and kind of the state of creativity and working in the modern world. So, today I think we're going to talk a little bit about gear, just a little bit, talk about some of the stuff that, me and Fitzi over here, we use to kind of do our job and how that kind of helps us work remotely. And then, why not jump right into the whole question of remote working? And is it good? Is it bad? Is it even a thing still? Does work even get done remotely, or does it just give us another excuse to play? So I think this will be an interesting episode as we do this all remotely.
I think that's a valid point there. And talking about gear, so the reason why we're talking about gear is Sean bought something very nice because he got the big paycheck. What did you buy?
Well, I, went ahead and bought myself a Mac Studio. So, finally, jumped over the cliff. I think I've always gotten these kind of refurbished computers. I've always been 2 or 3 years behind on the computers and about 6 or 7 years behind on my phone game. So, now it was like, let's do it. Let's get the rocket ship. Let's go to Mars and put money down. Tim Cook sent me a personal email and said, "Thank you so much, Sean. We're going to get that right to you." And you know what they did? They got it to me so quick. It was supposed to be here in like 3 or 4 weeks. I got it in like 5 days. And it's purring. It's beautiful. It's sitting over there curled up on its bed right now. It's such a good machine. I already love it.
Yeah, so because we are like in different fields, I think on your side you get away with less gear, and as a videographer, oh my god, you always need to have the latest and best gadget, and But let's talk about you first. So what do you need like a new computer? So how did you justify that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I mean, me being a web designer, a lot of web designers out there would probably poo-poo the idea of getting a Mac Studio. They'd be like, "Why?
Get a Chromebook."
Get a Chromebook, or why don't you just get a cool Innova or something? And I think I think the reason I really ended up jumping to go to the Mac Studio is just the playing around in the 3D and augmented reality world. It seems like I feel like that's going to be more of a thing in everyone's realm, right? I think just like when social media kind of first became a thing, right? We were like, well, that probably won't relate to my field, right? I'm just a graphic designer. I make logos. What does that have anything to do with social media? But I think now that we've seen like 15 years later that we're like, oh yeah, okay, it has everything to do with everyone's kind of career. So I think the same thing is with virtual reality and augmented reality, right? So right now you may say, well, what is a web designer or a logo designer really, what do they, what does augmented reality or that have to really do
with that? Yeah,
exactly. So it's where I think it will. And so for me, I think I was seeing myself like really kind of holding myself back on stuff where I was like, don't really dive down that road. You don't have the computer for it, and there's just really no reason to dive in. Where now it's like, with this powerful computer, now it can do things like a 3D.js, where we're able to make 3D graphics on the web. I'm able to kind of create something in something like After Effects. It's this 3D graphic, and then adding that into a web page, and and I think we've both been dabbling. I think you a ton more than me into these kind of 3D tools. Things like Blender and I just think it's an awesome new medium. So I kind of needed a new computer. My laptop had some keys falling out of it, which actually is really interesting. Just here's some kind of news that Apple just settled a lawsuit where I guess it's very common from like the years, I think like 2012 to like 2019, that if your keys are falling out of your MacBook and you've had to pay for repairs, they actually owe you money. So for you guys out there, if you've had some problems with those beautiful butterfly keyboards on those Apples, and by beautiful I mean terrible, definitely look into that. That may be something you may want to look into. But it really pushed me over the edge because, you go into a client meeting, right, and you have your keyboard falling out and some of it's taped in.
Let me put that F on there.
Exactly. Let me get that F on there. And that's happening, and then meanwhile it's like it's loading kind of slow, and I just kind of got tired of that, right? So one thing I do in a lot of my logos, for example, is I have kind of textures, like vector textures and stuff. And when you do that, anyone that's ever done that, where they've created, like, you get a picture of concrete and then you vectorize that concrete, anyone that's ever done that will tell you that it slows down your computer quite a bit. And so those files, once I would do that, would just be like, you would think I'm like on a 1999 machine where it's just like, move it, wait, move it, wait. And then, even just doing the little bits of Premiere I do, like a little bit of the video exporting I do, was just, I was pulling out hair. It was like, for like a very simple 20-second video, I would wait like 6-7 minutes for it to render, which is just like, this is ridiculous. And it wasn't like I'm Steven Spielberg. It's not like I have like a billion layers on top of it and all these effects. It was like the simplest stuff. So I was just like, you know what? I got that big paycheck that came in. I was like, all right, what does the next 5 years look like? The next 10 years look like? And I was like, let's get a spaceship that'll get us there. So yeah, I got this Mac Studio. I've already been benchmarking it, playing with it. And it's just so amazing. Even the small things, right? Like I had my laptop out yesterday, and just like the cursor, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
This,
So
I guess I never.
What MacBook you have?
Yeah. So the MacBook Pro that I have is the 2017 version.
Okay.
Yet again, I got it refurbished. It's kind of interesting. So I went down to Florida, and this happens to a lot of people. I think when they take that dive, the universe always likes to throw something at you. And for me, it was like it was literally, I think, to the day that I put in my, it was like literally to the day that I put in my 2 weeks at my job to be like, you know what, I'm quitting this, I'm moving to Florida, I'm starting freelance. And literally the next day, left the MacBook in my car, and it got down to like -5 that day, and MacBook never turned on again. And I was just like, are you really doing this to me? The second that I'm going full freelance, my biggest tool, the biggest thing that I depend on,
and the only
blows.
thing technically, that's like
Exactly.
one of the thing.
Right, and because anyone that's quit a job too, they and to go freelance, they'll definitely tell you it is kind of sad to be like, all right, buy my iMac monitor that's on my desk that my boss paid for. Goodbye, my beautiful server that my boss paid for.
Yeah.
But at least I have my MacBook Pro. Then that died, so that was a very big scramble to even get this computer, where this one's really cool, where I'm actually in a good financial place. This is actually the first time I've ever been able to buy a new Apple, and the old Apple still works.
Yeah.
It's never happened. It's always like one dies and I get a new one.
I think like it's a good thing to do, because like Apple products cost a lot of money. It's not a lot of bang for your buck, but I basically jumped also onto the Apple bandwagon, or wagon, however you call it, and got myself a MacBook. And it's my first time MacBook, and I'm like, oh my god, this is weird. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's jump to that. What's your first time impressions? As someone that's always been a PC guy, like how is it? How's it going?
Inconvenient. It sounds weird. Like I'm stuck in my way, kind of, sort of, but I'm always like trying to adapt new things and new tools and just play with it to, be like universal. But yeah, like the shortcuts are different. The operating system is like a little bit weird. The shortcuts are different.
Said that, yeah.
Yeah, so for me it was like, okay, I get that MacBook so I can leave that house. So because you told me you should get a MacBook and go out there and just like, be in public if you have problems working from home. And I'm like, okay, sounds like a good excuse to spend some money and actually like bring me out of my comfort zone. And always wanted to have a MacBook and be like, oh, let's see if it's really that good. Because like for exporting codecs and all that stuff, apparently they are very efficient in comparison to like a Windows PC. And so far, I did not get the top of the line one. I got like, I think in 2019 or something like that. And it's the base model. And it still exports like 4K and all the good stuff, but it's not as fast. So I'm like, I don't know if that was a good idea to go like the low spectrum and have a good impression, or should I have gotten for the newest one, but it's still an M1, so.
Well, and I guess it comes down to, when you're out and about at the cafe, you're clearly not going to be doing like your intense rendering and intense like Would you say it still helps you for like the kind of casual project edits, and then you can come back to your workstation at home and then do the real rendering?
Here's the situation I was in and why I bought it. So basically, like I said, like I want to leave the house and be productive. And productive basically just means like I should post more stories. And stories, they are viewed on the phone, so they don't really have to have like a big resolution. So I could post a 4K story on my phone via the MacBook or whatever and edit everything on the MacBook. But it's more about like leaving the house. And most of the things, like I said, it's not on the phone. You don't need 4K. So it's like I will not really hit a limit, even with that old MacBook, what is like kind of nice. Like, for example, I was like, okay, I will edit this podcast here, in the cafe and basically cut a couple of stories together. And I'm like realizing, I don't know the shortcuts. It was so embarrassing. I'm sitting there opening the project and I'm like, why does that not work? And everything is like the scroll wheel is inverted and I had to change so many things. I'm like, okay, after like an hour, I'm packing up and I go home and make it on my big PC.
Yeah, that does happen. It's true. It's making that jump to Apple is so interesting, isn't it? Like the operating system is such a different animal.
Yeah, and I'm well versed with technology. I'm like, I have no problems, but I was like, I felt so clumsy. That was weird.
Oh yeah. Well, even like transferring stuff over from my laptop to my Mac Studio, it was really funny because there's still things that even I got stuck on, and I'm sitting here like, man, it's been a decade of being a Apple fanboy, and I'm still. But it's really cool though once you figure out all of these different things like AirDrop and just all these amazing just tools.
I still have to play with that. I still have issues with that. It's kind of nice. Like I see all my photos from the phone on there. I'm just like, the whole environment is a little bit different, like the ecosystem, and so much to learn.
Yeah, but I think you'll love it. I think I remember when I got pushed in the Apple world, I really did get pushed. I think it really happened. Like I got taught on Apples back in high school, but it was really funny. It was in art school where they really like, nope, you got to do Apple. There's no PC, and I remember fighting that so hard, but and it does. It's such a weird ecosystem, but I think it's good, man. And I mean, to your point of like being mobile, that's the big thing. I mean, I'm still going to use my laptop. Like my new flow is have most of the stuff live on this computer here, and then when I got to leave here, then just AirDrop it, and it's crazy. Like I did a gigabyte file, I AirDropped it to my laptop. Yeah, it took literally 12 seconds for a gigabyte to go from my computer to my laptop. It was absolutely insane. Like
I need to play with that a little bit.
Oh yeah. So it's like and it's just so cool, but you're right though. You have to kind of get out of the house because it's. Yeah, I know I've been struggling with that where, these days I try to do the 8 to 10 hours in the office. It's mind numbing.
Yeah, so. It's a weird thing. Like working from home seems like the dream. Everybody's like, okay, I'm sitting at home. I make myself a nice pot of coffee and just like having some music playing and being in my favorite environment, and then I do some work. But the reality is like you most of the time don't do the work. At least for me, I don't have like I don't know, like it's a weird thing. It's a very slippery slide where you're like, because I don't have a boss looking over my shoulder, I'm like, okay, now I'm doing this, or I do this in a little moment, and I watch a YouTube video in between, and then you're just like, now I'm not doing anything. And if I get that social pressure, I'm like, it's kind of nice having it, then you're more productive. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, it's it's interesting because you are your own boss, right? And so I think some of us are really good creatives, but some of us aren't very good bosses. So I know I kind of make that joke with myself, in the freelance world. I kind of tell people like, sorry, I can't hang out tonight. The boss is kind of an ass, and I'm the boss, or man, that boss, man, he wasn't really able to pay me this last month, and he still wants me to come in. It's like, so.
And there's no real punishment, like if you slack, you're like, oh, there's no money coming in, but you also don't really first immediately feel it, as it's dragging on. You lose your momentum, and then slowly less gigs, and then slowly, and it's like a slippery slope, and everything is happening slow instead of like fast, because there's still people reaching once in a while out, but it's not the same amount as, if you're like hitting it every day, and
Oh yeah. No, you're 100% right. I mean, I think it's the accountability, right? It's all that accountability. It's all of that. It's and being self-accountable is good, but it can also go bad the other way, right? Where you can be too hard on yourself. You can get depressed, and you can really get in your own head about it. What's nice is when someone externally is telling you need to do better, at least it's not in your own head. But that's what's weird when you're your own boss, because you almost feel like you're losing your mind, right? You're a little schizophrenic, where you have this boss in your head telling you need to do more, and then you have this other guy in your head that's like, but let's rest. I just want to watch TV and rest. Yeah. And so, I know for me, like I've started to work at a co-working space here in town, where, and for anyone out there who doesn't know what a co-working space is, it's just a place where people all come together and work on their separate projects or companies. You usually pay a membership fee.
It's an expensive Starbucks.
Yeah, it's like an expensive Starbucks. But what's funny is you start to do the math, and a lot of these places, they have free coffee, free drinks, free food. But, so you can do the math, and if you are going to a cafe every single day, which I've been there, it actually can be cheaper. But what's cool too is it's kind of a networking thing. That's what's kind of cool too. Is you're like, you're at a table with a social media manager across from a developer, and then a CEO down the table. And so it's kind of cool. It kind of puts you into these networking places too. But what I like about it is there's just nothing to do at a co-working space but work, right? So it's nice. Your butt gets in that chair, and there's nothing. I mean, you can sit there and watch videos, but it's kind of awkward to be watching videos around all these people that are working. So there's something to be said about that too. I think just being around other people that are working kind of pushes you to work too, right? It's harder for you to be a lazy bum when everyone around you is being awesome.
Yeah, and it kind of rubs off, and it's like one of the things, like the people you surround you with, they basically like shape you, So if you hang out with people who are hustling and bustling, it's good for you, because then you don't want to hustle and bustle too, because you just don't want to look lazy. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
But on that,
go for it.
Yeah, on that note though, that brings us exactly to the next topic: working from home. And what is the guy's name? Ian Goodfellow?
Oh, yeah. So, so you're talking about, Ian Goodfellow over at Apple? Yeah.
Yeah,
so he was the director of, like, augmented reality or something?
No, I think it was, like, AI. So he's, like, an expert, and he basically is, like, real talent. So working from home is, like, one thing, but obviously it's kind of nice having, like, your employees coming into work, but... So I think he worked at Apple, and they changed like the what was the news? Like, do we want to pull it up, or do we want to just do it out of our head?
I kind of remember. So I mean, so Apple had so Apple was kind of putting out this pilot program because, just like everyone knows, in 2022, most of the workforces went fully remote, especially those kind of technological companies like Facebook, Meta, Twitter,
Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
So even like Twitter kind of famously put out the thing that they were always forevermore going to allow people to work from home if they chose, which is kind of funny with the Elon Musk thing because he's completely opposite. So I think that's an interesting friction point we could get into too. But so a lot of those companies did that. Facebook was one of them. Apple was one of them. All the big ones were doing that. But now
they had to, like COVID, they would shut everything down. It would very inconvenient.
Well, especially a lot of them being in California, and California having some of the toughest COVID laws in the whole country. So I'm sure that had something to do with it too.
Yeah.
But so now they've started a new pilot program. Apple has, and where they're trying to get people to come back 3 days a week. And so they did this, and it's interesting because it's immediately caused an intense uproar within the company, where you have a lot of people that just
don't want to do it,
straight up don't want to do it, and don't think that it helps at all. and that it actually promotes some bad things as well. And so yeah, so I think so you're talking about Ian Goodfellow. He was he's the director of machine learning at Apple, and he he was and he probably already has another job, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But he so he's responsible for some of the things like the little cartoony face on your phone and stuff like that. He's kind of the brainchild behind all of that. He's the one that kind of helped develop all that.
Yeah, we're talking about deepfakes. So he developed deepfakes for everybody not knowing what a deepfake is. Basically, you see a video and you can slap on a different face, and it's nearly impossible to tell if that's the person that you're seeing or if it's a fake. And that's why it's called a deepfake. There's famously the Tom Cruise deepfake, where a person plays some golf and acts like Tom Cruise, but it's not Tom Cruise. But you would not tell.
Yeah.
What is crazy.
Yeah. We can definitely jump into that later in this episode, just kind of showing some of these deepfakes. But so he's the director of machine learning, which is obviously what helps create deepfakes. And it's just really interesting that such a high-level person in a company would step down, right? That you would think directors of the companies and stuff that they would want to be working from the office. You'd think it'd be easier for them to like lead teams, but it's interesting where they're pushing out against it. Like I had already mentioned that Twitter's in this interesting place where they said forevermore if you want to work from home you can, but now you have this Elon Musk coming in, and Elon Musk, I think, famously just recently said that like everyone working from home is just faking work. Everyone's faking work. He pretty much said that anyone that works from home is just faking it, and that he doesn't want to pay a bunch of fake workers.
That's weird. I mean, I kind of get it, and I kind of don't get it. There's like two sides to it. On the one side, having an office, you have to pay for it. It's an insane amount of rent you have to pay for the office, the infrastructure, and all that jazz. But also, if you're a worker, you have to travel, and you spend like 30 minutes, 40 minutes to go to work and then go back home in some cases, Yeah. So there's good parts and bad parts. Like I personally, I can't really work well from home. If I have a deadline and I feel guilty, no problem. But if there's no guilt involved and no money on the line, we're pushing it a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean, it's an interesting topic because I see both sides, right? Like when I think about my own career and the amount of work I've been able to do at different parts, I think arguably when I was in an office, so I'll say this. So there's been times I've been in offices and there's been a lot of nothing getting done. I will say that.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of times where I've worked in offices, we're having tons of meetings, we're having all these fun ideation sessions and stuff, and then they're fun, right? We're putting stuff on the walls, and we're feeling real cool, and we just spent 3 hours going over something. But then, I've seen things not actually come out of that. I've seen we did all this stuff in the office, all these team building things and stuff, but then nothing really gets produced, and we're missing deadlines.
Yeah.
And then, but then I've also been in an office where I've been tied to that computer all day, and I'm putting out 4 branding projects, and I designed 2 things for these 2 events, and at the same time just launched a website, and then I'm on the phone over here, and obviously by the end of that day I'm just exhausted, right? I've literally used every moment of my day to work. So I've been there too, which that doesn't happen here in this office. I'll tell you what, when I'm here at home, I'm not boom, 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 boom. There definitely is get something done.
There's a balance
take a walk.
to it. So here's the thing though, that really reminded me of Amazon, and it's it's a weird thing nowadays, technically there's all those tracking devices to see your performance on the PC, what actually you're doing, what sites you're doing, how many minutes you spend on what side, and how often you move your cursor. And if you work in Amazon in a warehouse, oh my God, they are you have to package that many things in a hour, and it's it's an insane amount of work you have to do, and you basically get pushed to your limit, and you're basically afterwards you're nearly dead, you're just okay, I did my shift, it was just 8 hours, but I'm feeling like I worked 24 hours. So on the one side, the work balance, you can't be at work and be lazy and don't do anything, what is weird too. Obviously you shouldn't. So how far should you push that, how far should you push productivity? It's a weird thing,
It is. And what's interesting, so recently Owl Labs, which they do a lot of like kind of work related kind of studies.
Yeah.
They just came out with statistics that 55% of remote workers work more hours than a physical worker.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing to kind of add in this mix too, is that people that work from home tend to actually, in terms of time, work more hours. So
but are they productive hours? That's also like the thing.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I think you can maybe make the argument that they are still being productive, but it's like slower in those hours, right? So instead of such intense hitting something, it's kind of letting something dry out and be kind of more relaxing. So it's like more hours versus more intense work in the workspace.
Yeah.
I just feel like I've seen this so many times. I kind of subscribe to this. I don't know the exact data or whatever, but I think like 4 hours every day is when most of the work happens. And I think a lot of creatives, I think, would agree to that you have about 4 hours that you just like make a ton of progress outside of that. And those 4 hours could be anywhere, depending how you are in your day, like when you sleep and when you wake up and things. But I think, so I think in the workspace, I think that same thing happens, right? Like you get there at 8 or 9 in the morning, maybe you work from 9 to 1, and then I think after that, you're just kind of running on 50%
or less.
I mean, yeah.
There's like a thing where they say you have a set amount of willpower a day, and I think it's a really interesting concept, Whatever you do, you will deplete the willpower a little bit. Like, let's say you're trying to not watch the YouTube video, less willpower, or you're not trying to, and the more you're like deny, and the more, basically, you can only do so much work a day. So, and I'm like, it's a thing where I have to practice a little bit and to get more done, but yeah. Well, I mean, it's willpower, it's energy, and it's happiness too. I think I think that's something that has to really be also mentioned, is that just being happy, you work more. And that's a freelance thing, Real companies don't have happiness because they're about that money.
Well, yeah, yes and no. I think companies really do try to make happiness, right? That's where you get company culture. That's where you get, today's ice cream day, and tomorrow we're gonna go do this fun thing at the brewery. I know when I was in the tech world, especially, that was a big thing of like Fridays we do ice cream every afternoon, and then on Thursdays at lunch we do yoga in the park. So they try to, they get that you need to be happy to do your job.
Yeah.
And so there is something about that too to be said about remote work, right? Like you can maybe make yourself happy by taking a break and playing some video game for a little bit, or you can at least be like, you know what, I need to go take a walk, and you don't have to ask anyone permission. One thing I do like about remote work that I do want to mention too is the idea of mental health days and being sick is so much more relaxing in the remote world than it ever was in the office world. That's one of the reasons I kind of went freelance. I wouldn't say it's the main reason, but it was probably in the top 10 reasons of, when I wake up and I'm having a terrible morning. Let's say I didn't sleep at all, and I feel terrible. I'm not in the mood.
That's me today.
That's you right now. Some of you guys watching right now, you're probably like nodding your head, probably. I could just take the day off in most cases. It's like I could actually, yet again, I have that boss in my head. And I could be like, hey, boss, I don't feel good today. And he'd be like, cool. Where, like, when I was in a job, I see this a lot where even if your boss is pretty cool about you taking mental health days, you still have to explain yourself a lot. And there's something to that where I think a lot of people fear taking work off. They fear being like, hey, boss, I'm depressed. Like, even saying that, I think, is very scary for a lot of people.
And weird,
so for someone,
too. Like, you have to have a relationship with your boss, that he even cares, or, It's a weird thing.
And I've seen some weird stuff. Like, I'm not going to name names or companies, but I've definitely seen some times where like someone will take off a mental health day, and then the boss will come to me and be like, God, can you believe that they're taking another day off? I can't believe this person. And there's just a lot of that weird negativity that builds up within an office, especially if other people have to cover your workload, right? So you take off a mental health day, but now I have to do part of your job today. That's building, some animosity between us where you now have to regret taking time off for yourself. So I think there's stuff like that or like weather here in Colorado, we'll have a blizzard, right, where it's like 4 feet of snow.
But you're still coming into work, or?
Yeah, the town's shut down. And then what do you see? You see that poor Wendy's employee trying to shovel their way into the parking lot of Wendy's. So they can
trying to get that 910 or whatever it is.
Yeah, and that they called their boss is like, hey, boss, it's 4 feet of snow outside. Maybe Wendy's doesn't need to be open. And their boss is like, are you kidding me? If Wendy's closes, the union's done. America's over if Wendy's closes. And it's just this crazy type of... So in a way, I love that COVID did happen. That I love that we did get all pushed into the home, because I think there was a lot of businesses and bosses that just were never going to go remote. They were never going to allow it. They just had this weird belief that it was a bad thing.
Yeah.
But we saw that, everything kept going. Some people would still argue that, with people working remotely, that the economy has slowed down and development of stuff has slowed down. And I think to a degree, you may be right. There may be some things that go slower now, but I feel like overall, though, things still run just fine with people working from home.
Kind of, yeah. Like the news and the world are kind of crazy right now. So obviously, there's a lot of things that is not running well and efficient. But overall, I think we kind of made it somewhat through the whole crisis. There's still probably something coming afterwards, but I think the economy is somewhat recovered.
Oh yeah, well
somewhat.
Yeah, I think somewhat, exactly. Yeah, we say this possibly on the eve of a recession, but yeah.
I mean, we're right in it, but yeah.
But so one thing I did also want to bring up on this topic that I found the other day that was really interesting is that Meta, the company of Facebook, had created this goal of boosting their diversity within the workplace. I think something like 50%, and they wanted to do that by the year 2024, 2025. They wanted to boost diversity. And what's interesting is they've already met that goal by going remote. By going remote, it actually promoted more diversity. You didn't have to live in San Francisco to work at Meta. You could be, someone that works on a Native American reservation in the middle of Arizona. You could be someone that's an Inuit in Alaska. You could be some guy that's doing some cool work in a little office in Detroit. So it kind of so what's cool too about the remote work is it's promoted diversity.
Yeah, what is a real good thing, because if you think about it, if you have a racist boss, it's really unlikely that he wants to hire the people that he doesn't like. And it makes it easy. And and also it's with the internet, you lose your identity a little bit. You become just a avatar, you know what I mean? And basically it's really easy to work with that avatar versus there's not a person where they do stuff that I don't really like, whatever it is, it could be a political view, could be anything,
Yeah. Well, and just the geographic location. I mean, I got headhunted by Facebook 3 years ago, where they wanted me to be a presentation designer. So that literally would have been my only job, is just designing presentations all day. And I ended up having to say no. I mean, I think the offer was huge too. I think it was $120,000 a year or something to that effect, and that was great. But then you look into the price of living, and it's okay, well, for me to have a studio apartment is going to cost $40,000. Yeah. To even get a mobile home somewhere, it's going to be insane. So it was just it was this thing where it was going to literally come out to the fact that I was going to make just as much as I would working anywhere else. So, you can make the argument, well, that's a good way to get into that area. But then when you're in those areas, it's a very intense type of situation. I don't know if you know anyone that's been out in Silicon Valley or that area, but they'll tell you that it's intense, because
I saw some documentations about people living in trailers and whatever, because they can't afford anything there. Exactly. Because it's so expensive. And I think that will also lead to equalization of income and whatever, all the places where when you can work from home, you don't have to be at the location. You still get hired for the set amount, for example, and then you're maybe making more in a cheap area. But in an expensive area, it maybe goes a little bit down. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people from California, I forgot the actual term, but there's almost this rent for opportunities that you pay, right?
Yeah.
So if I live in LA, I'm right there next to a lot of entertainment companies and things like that. So like, let's say you're a videographer and you live in LA, you're right next to so many more gigs than you would be in, I don't know, Topeka.
Yeah. Location
like,
kind of matters still. Like, this is like a weird thing. Like you need to be in a big city.
It still does. Because with that being said, I think, we can kind of divert a little bit here of like what we kind of talked about earlier is with everyone being remote and most of the networking starting to happen remotely, like people sliding in your DMs or you being part of Zoom conferences or whatever it is, or even cold emailing or LinkedIn or whatever, I feel like it's made being in person even more impactful. Like that's what I'm starting to see is the people that actually have the guts and courage to go out there and be in the world actually have more power now than ever before, because it seems like the most popular thing now for most people is to hide away in their office, and that's the way they try to network. That's the way they try to connect. And not to say that that doesn't work. I think that there's people out there that show that works brilliantly, but I would say if you're trying to make an impact, if you're trying to meet people, it seems like the being in person is still so big, and just to be there and actually have the guts to be there and face someone, I feel like still most of the big opportunities that I had happened from something face to face still.
Yeah, and I mean, like I experimented actually, like it's kind of weird, the virtual reality. My buddy Jonathan and I have like a VR headset, and he moved away, and we're like, let's have a meeting and hang out in VR. It was a weird experience. It was still kind of like, it felt like, oh, he's there, but even though he's not there, but not on the same level, And I'm like, oh, in the future, that will be maybe a thing. But nowadays, if you meet somebody over the internet, the contact that is maybe living in a different state is not as valuable as like same city. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, even us doing this podcast remotely, I'm sure is different than if we were doing it in person. I'm sure that there's something that's different about it. I think this podcast goes well remotely only because we have met in person and we have this kind of rapport being in person. But yeah, if we had like just met the other day and did this, and we only met remotely, it'd maybe be a more interesting, different type of interaction that we would have.
So that kind of makes me think of missed opportunities not being in person, and I'm like, what is actually the thing that you miss out on? Because like, there's not many things that are extra gained through being in person, but after like thinking about it, you kind of get dragged along by a couple things. Like, for example, you went to the station house, you talked to people, introduced me, and people listened to our conversations when we were in person in a coffee space, and they just joined in, like being in person puts you in places, I think, sometimes.
It does. I mean, and those are kind of my favorite experiences, right? Is someone saying like, hey, I don't mean to jump in, but oh, that's a great point, or someone kind of being like, I'm having a hard day, let's talk about this, and we would be like, yeah, let's go over it, man. What's going on? And I feel like there is something to be said about those kind of those things that just drop out of the air in front of you, where online it's very curated, right? Like you're
and
curating
also
your whole
isolated.
experience.
Like if you think about it, right now there's nobody being here, so the equivalent would be like live streaming, and strangers could listen. But that only would happen if they actually know about this podcast, But now I was like thinking, if we wanted to recreate the same effect, we would have to go into a game where a lot of people are and have like an open conversation. Let's say like a marketplace, for example, in like VR chat or whatever. And there's a bunch of people doing their thing, and we're just sitting there having our conversation. Then we maybe would meet people and get into different situations. So I think being in a public place is probably a key part too.
I think so. I think it's a balance. I think it's definitely a balance, right? So I think so to kind of get back into remote work, like what is it going to still be a thing going forward? I mean, what do you think? Do you think now we're in a new time where there's always going to be remote workers, or do you think there is going to be a push to go back to in person?
I think it's like my idea about the whole thing is like it's very weird, because like on the one side, if you want to really optimize the not working from home, It would be so beneficial. You talked about California, and like the taxes there are insane. So what happens if you work in a company in California, but you are located in Florida, for example? What taxes do you pay? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah.
So
in
I'm
that
like,
case,
technically, you could move all the nice companies to like a tax haven, kind of sort of, and run your business, and that is a great thing, I think. Like if you're a boss, and on the flip side though is like how can you optimize like the work output? And I think right now most companies are not really prepared for that, or they're still like in their chains that they basically put on themselves. Like, oh, we got this nice office, we got all those nice things, and now they have to pay for that, and it's not getting return on investment. So it's like,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
But everything
yeah,
is
I mean,
moving into that Amazon age where it's like, oh, just order it from home. It's sad. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and to kind of, and I don't know. This is me just kind of poking and prodding the idea. I don't really know this for fact, but to kind of zoom out a little bit. I mean, one of the big issues that we haven't mentioned on this channel at all because it hasn't had anything to do with creativity is, at least up till now, is climate change, right? I mean, there's so much going on right now where you have these huge mega droughts now happening in the West. You have fires in all these different places. You speak about Florida. There's still the idea of the sea level rise in some places in Florida.
I got beachfront property right now.
Exactly. So, so with that happening too, it's interesting because there may be an argument of we don't need millions of people living in the middle of the desert, or maybe
Well, it's a good thing not doing, because then you don't have food. I saw a comedy skit about that, and it was like, oh, he made a whole skit about that. Oh, people are hungry in the world, and like, why do you live in the desert? Kind of, sort of, is the punchline. Because, like, if you go somewhere where there's food and everything, you're fine.
Well, and the fact that, with climate change, we're going to probably have to move around, possibly. Like, there may be climates that just completely change, and you may have to, like, who knows, San Francisco may not always be awesome weather,
Yeah, water is a big part, too. Or didn't that affect your state a little bit?
Well, yeah, so Colorado's a headwater state, so we're one of, I think there's only two in the continental U.S. where water actually starts in that state, and so Colorado's one of them. So the Colorado River, for example, is fed mostly from Colorado, and a lot of the major rivers that go out west through Arizona, and they're the ones that kind of feed Las Vegas, feed L.A., and so right now you're seeing that like the more water we use here, with a lot of people moving to Colorado, there's more and more water being used, so there's less and less water downriver. And I expect that there's going to be definitely some really, really big battles ahead over water. And so for remote working, it's interesting because it allows businesses to be a lot more agile, right? We didn't build this big, expensive office now somewhere where there's all these water restrictions and it's hitting 105 degrees every day in temperature.
Only like 2-minute showers and all that jazz,
Yeah, so it's like so that's kind of nice too with the remote working, is it kind of allows people, I think, to move around more and businesses to be more agile where So overall, I think remote working, I think it's good. I think it's going to stick around. I think that we're in a weird growing phase with it, where I do think there is a lot of fake work that's going on, and by that I just mean like people, that aren't doing their job. They're not pushing things hard. Maybe they're doing their bare minimum, but then they're telling their boss they're doing their bare maximum.
I have an analogy for the whole situation right now. Back in the days when you had in the city and you had to live in the city to get like a lot of contacts and be in a place. That's the internet nowadays. But the internet was not effective because of the means of communication. Now we have all those video chats and everything. And I think we're getting to a point where like let's say 5G is coming out and we get an 8K live stream, and you could put live stream a 360 camera. You could be in the same room. Like right now, the capabilities are not really there yet because the speeds are so slow. But if we have that coming, the internet will be like the big city life all over the globe with everybody, and then everybody lives in the same city. You see what I mean?
Well, right, and I think I think there's so many technologies too that like let's say language to language technology, right? English to Spanish or Mandarin to French. I mean, there could be a whole new reality, right, where a lot of your employees aren't even American, they're not even English speaking, and then they're right next to you, and through AI and some type of automation, it's going ahead and they're actually talking English to you. So
I think Google has an app where you just hold it to the person speaking and it translates instantly.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like,
yeah, exactly. So that technology is like right there already. So I think so that's interesting too, right? Is that you may have all of these different people from all over the world right next to you speaking a language that you understand. So it's going to be cool in some regards, but it's also, as we've seen with globalism, that means the competition just got a lot wider for your job, right? Because at least before you were like, oh, well, at least I can speak English, but now it's like, man, not really. Now you're going against all the Germans and the French people and the Russians and some Indian
there's
people
a lot of
as
talent
well.
out there, and the internet is like kind of pain in the ass on that regards. It's really nice. It's really nice being a gatekeeper. If you have some information, not everybody can get it. You can make an easy living of it. And the more it gets distributed, the harder and harder it gets to make a living of it because you have to be on the top of the thing, which is nearly impossible if there's so many talented people there.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I always kind of say that about a lot of the design tools, is that democracy is good for everyone except for the person that kind of controlled those strings before, right? So in the design world, tools like Canva or Adobe just released something that's like automatic. I forgot what it is. It's like Adobe Express or something like that, where it's more of a Canva thing where, and I think in one of the later episodes we'll do a deep dive in that kind of world. But like I'm seeing that with these things, it's democratized design for people that couldn't afford it or didn't feel like they had access. However, there's negatives to that too. When everyone thinks that they can do what you do, then what value do you have? And I think that's always going to be the interesting thing. So even in remote working, it's like, before you had to make if I wanted to work at Apple, I needed to like take the dive and go out there and prove myself. Where now I don't. So now I'm competing with a lot more people.
Yeah.
So the bar's lowered, and that could be good. But that means anyone that was already going over the bar, that were going to go over the bar and work their butts off, now they're down here with everyone else, and they have to really, So it's just like most things when we talk about AI, automations, the new tools, technology. There's always going to be this weird balance, right? Where we're talking about it's helpful, but then in terms of how it democratizes things, but it also makes all of us have to work a bit harder because now everything's just more.
But on that note, like it sounds like really like scary. Let's say if you compete with the internet, you have to compete with everybody. But the solution that I figured out so far is like you only have to specialize in some types. Like some people, if you want to be the best videographer, oh my God, I don't even know where to start there. But you can be the best kids photographer or whatever. The more you niche down, the easier it will get and the less competition you have. But also, like, it becomes really boring, And I think nowadays it's a weird time. Like, if you're not an expert in a one specific niche, the knowledge that you have to compete with everybody on a big topic is, like, crazy.
Yeah, and that's almost its own
topic.
Yeah, that's its own topic, almost right there. Because I know I struggle with that, where I've always been a creative that loves exploration. And I think a lot of creatives are like that. I've seen that go too far. I've kind of coined the term the Da Vinci paradox is what I call it, where people think they're Da Vinci. I'm a painter. I'm an engineer. I can write things. And that's cool and that's great. But people have to remember that to like master these things, you have to put in so much time and effort, and you really do need to like keep working and working. Where now I do see people, now that all these things are so available, for me to be a videographer, it costs so much less than it ever did. For someone to be a web designer, it costs so much less than it ever did. We can do all these things remotely now. We can do all these things a lot more easily. So people, I think, have thought, or a lot of people now are thinking that, oh, well, I can do it all now. Like, I'm just a good creative, and so therefore I can do all these different things. And then I see those people not really produce anything that amazing at all.
Yeah.
because they're not really focused on anything. So it's interesting. I think you're right. Where it's that back and forth of like things are easier to get to, but you need to focus still. You need to focus, but on the other hand too, though, you need to explore too. So it's weird. I'm like in this weird place where I don't know which side to really agree with. I think people should not feel like they have to focus in like that because we're not tools at the end of the day.
Yeah, we're just
you're not the
end, but
yeah, we're humans, and what's most valuable in us is what's in here, right? And so it should never be what we can do with our hands. And so, but you're right. So there is that weird dance, right? Do we niche or do we not niche? And
yeah. So what I heard about that was like, especially with AI, is like in the future it doesn't really matter what skills you have. It's like how good of an idea you have. So basically, if you can phrase like certain phrases that AI has to solve, if you can make the phrase or the idea really good, you will get a really good result, So it's more about like what ideas can you combine and how useful are those ideas. So it's more by combining ideas, what will be a big skill in the future. What is like basically like you have no idea about anything, but you're just like assembling ideas. What is kind of, I guess, then the new thing, but also it's like very like how good can that be,
Yeah. I mean, so it's
a weird future.
It is a weird future, So with the remotes and with like kind of the remote working and things like that, I think I don't think it's going to go away. I think we saw a big rise. We're seeing it kind of level back out. And I don't know. I think at the end of the day, though, I think the one good thing that's coming from remote working is that people, or businesses, I should say, are seeing that they need to keep you engaged and interested in the workplace, and that they need to maybe be more relaxed about some things. Like you should be able to call in and say you need a mental health day, and they should not guilt you over that. And
because like you can't lose employees, like they lost Ian Goodwill or Goodfellow. Wow, I'm butchering that name so badly. It's like there's a movie, The Goodfellas, I think, and I'm just like, yeah. So I'm just like, anyhow, but talent is really expensive, and training people, and especially having like a person who's like front developer and he's the main brain there. You don't want to lose a person because of that, because it's all about the ideas and the skills.
It is. It's so exactly. Just like it's always been, finding good talent's hard for these companies, and so I think it is. It's going to just be more important to be more relaxed, and I think that's what we're seeing is that in these weird growing pains. I think when I hear Elon Musk say like, no, I'm going to require everyone to be in work. I'm going to require everyone to be there. I think I think he's really putting himself in a place where he may be doing some big harm to himself. I think if I was hearing that and I was a competitor of Tesla, I would go the opposite way. Then I'd say, hey, come here, Tesla people. Don't worry, you can all work remotely.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about this guy.
But I think like companies are like kind of like just principles, and those principles are kind of enforced by the the CEOs and whatever. And if the principles are good principles, then maybe we'll make a living with that and we'll survive for a certain time. Mm-hmm. But I think like Elon is like a person who likes things a certain way, and it worked out for him. And I think like as long as he gets people who work with that kind of well, then he will make it. But yeah, obviously you will lose some good talents that you could have otherwise kept, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, and we haven't really touched on this, but, I think with technologies like people screen watching you, there's ways, there's a lot of good project management applications out there like Asana that, they do such a good job of breaking things down and kind of keeping track of people. So it's interesting. You are seeing this thing where people feel like they need to keep closer track of you, too, while you're working from home.
And it gets really invasive.
It can get really, really invasive, exactly. And so with that being said, I mean, it's just interesting. It'll be interesting to see how this kind of rolls out. But I don't think it's going anywhere. I think one of the best things that I like about being remote and just freelance in general is that there's a lot of me not depending on the boss, and I think that creates a very much more relaxed experience for the boss and for me. I've talked to bosses where they get really stressed where they're like, I know that people depend on me and I can't, I'm letting them down.
Yeah.
Where, for us freelancers, we're not so scary if you let us down, right? We're like, well, we'll just find other gigs and stuff. So I like having that relaxation with me and the client. I think this is more of a talk of going freelance versus staying somewhere. But, I think that people like that, I have a better interaction with people when there's not all the stress involved. When it's like, hey man, you're having a hard time being able to pay people, no worries, I'm going to go ahead and leave. It's not a big deal. Or like if I was a worker and like, oh, I moved my whole family to be here and all of these things.
How dare you,
Exactly. And it adds a lot of stress on the boss. It adds a lot of stress on the employee. And so it's like, it's a scary world being freelance and remote, but it's like you own all of that. So it's not like, my clients don't have to feel responsible for keeping me alive.
Yeah. On that note, we did not do calls to action. We should have told people that they should sign up with Riverside to basically host their own podcast as we do. Also, we did not tell those people that they should rate this podcast 5 stars. And also, let a comment down below about like your experiences with like working from home, what you like and what you don't like. So, we should have.
I like our regretful call to actions. I feel like we should do it every time. Like when we're like slightly regretting like not doing the call to action, and then doing the call to action in our regret. I like it.
Yeah, this is how I do sometimes. Should it?
But we're on YouTube now, everybody. So please get on there. Please like, comment, subscribe. Please do all of those things. Infinite Creative Podcast. We're kind of up there on YouTube. I've been checking that out. I think on Spotify you may have to look for us a little bit. We're going to start getting a little bit better about our Instagram kind of clips and things like that as well.
We'll get there.
Please.
We will get there.
And we're looking for people to be on the show. So if you are seeing this and you feel like, hey, we maybe need some voice and you have a good voice for it, you don't even have to be a creative. Please send us a message or an email. We'd love to have you on. We know that this can only go so far with two crazy freelance people talking. So it would be cool to have someone on here as well. So it doesn't matter if you're a web designer, videographer, logo designer, illustrator. It doesn't even matter if you're just a business owner, an accountant. Anything. I don't care if you're a lumberjack. Come on, we'll talk about it.
I like that. How to get creative with those pipes. On that note, like I already reached out to a couple of people, and I'm like, there's some people interested being on the show. Actually, I think like maybe we get a web designer on here and see his view, what will be interesting with you. And I'm also thinking about like other people, but I'm very curious about that. So getting guests on, there's a lot to come, and we need to still get an intro, and I'm working on a couple of things for this podcast. Actually, we're uploading.
The videographer, man, he takes forever, I tell you.
Yeah, the budget is not really there to justify the stress.
It's true, it's that remote work. You got to get him in the office. So there's your calls to action. I mean, so if you're watching this, please subscribe. Tell people about us. We're just trying to grow this nice and humble. We don't make any money from this, and we don't really, we're just doing this for the good of the people, the creative world. But we're doing it for you. We're doing it for the people, right? So at least you have something to listen to while you're doing work. So if you feel like you can come on, if you want to like even just get some training in podcasting, you want to kind of dip your toes in, and maybe this is a good place for you to dip your toes in. Come on down. Let's do it together. Let's learn together.
Just talk about yourself. But anyhow, like where can people find you, Sean?
Well, so you can find me at Sean, Sean, Craig, Craig, creative.com. You can find me on Instagram, same thing, Sean Craig Creative. And feel free to send me an email at hello@seancraigcreative.com.
You can find me at Fitzi everywhere on social media, or fitzi.com, and it's FITZAEY.com, or whatever. So thank you for listening, and see you in another episode. This seems to be a weekly thing.
We've done good. We'll keep it weekly. We'll keep it remote. But thanks everybody. Stay safe out there with those mega droughts and those robots and the end of the world approaching. Just be safe, be happy, and be creative.
Have a good one. Bye.